Hi YouTube, here's another video of mine in which I will try to present the 5M65 Landmaster Seiko, known by its code of SBDW005. This particular watch is just one of the many in the Landmaster series, which happens to be at this time the longest running series of watches in the Seiko lineup, starting from 1993 with the SBDW stainless steel Landmaster. Then the SBDW001 came out, the first titanium made Landmaster, essentially identical to this one, save for the type of kinetic engine used. Back then it was the 5M45, which in the year 2000 got upgraded to a 5M65 GMT kinetic movement, now housed in this beautiful titanium case. The Landmaster series are essentially trekking watches. You can easily understand this fact taking a look at this beautiful bezel. The bezel is also made of titanium and it's cast by forcing liquid titanium into a single matrix. It's a very impressive bezel, very well made. It turns both ways and it doesn't have any audible clicks because there are none. It's a continuous bezel and it's used not as a timing bezel, as is the case with diving bezels, but rather to find your bearings with regards to the points in a compass, if you don't happen to have a compass with you. What you do is you line up the bezel against the sun and quite easily find your bearings, if of course the sun can be seen. The watch is made, as I said, 100% by titanium. This is both regular titanium, or titanium G, as Seiko calls it, and bright titanium in some places, or titanium B. The case is surprisingly tough for a titanium watch. Indeed, I've seen a lot of those come up for sale during the past few years, and although there are watches that have had quite a lot of wear, they are at least 15 years old or more, still the case has surprisingly little in the way of damage accumulated across all over these years. And this is probably has to do with some kind of hardening, or perhaps the way the case itself is made. It's a one-piece case. It does not have a screw back, so there was one less possible point of entry for water. If you have to open the case, you do it from the top. You have to remove the bezel, then the crystal, and then you gain some access to the engine. The good thing about it is that the kinetic engine is a very reliable movement. Usually, if you wear it constantly, it would probably just require a simple capacitor change once every 10 years or even more. So this watch is made to last, and last it does. The bracelet, well, the back side is 20 millimeters, so it's very balanced optically. Total. The watch itself is 41 millimeters wide without the crown. It's a very nice size, practical for most, but it tends to sit rather high on the wrist. You'll see a couple of wrist shots later on. The crown, it's unsigned, which is a bit rare for a Seiko. And this is the power reserve indicator, which is as with every kinetic watch. If you press it once, it will show exactly how much of a power reserve is left with the capacitor. Perhaps you can hear the movement of the rotor inside, which separates this watch from the simple quartz. The bracelet itself is well made, it's pretty comfortable, but it is sort of a dirt magnet. It appears at first glance that the links are separated completely, but they are not, if you see it from here. So those little gaps tend to accumulate dirt, so you need to give it a good wash from now and then. The end links are not solid, but back then in 2000 even Rolexes didn't have solid end links, much less a titanium watch. There's a brass surface and a small two polished lines. Here it's a very useful bracelet. The buckle, it's of the standard Landmaster type, meaning that if you need to extend the buckle, you just pull lightly this way and off it goes. Very practical. Although again, some will say, well, why put this on a non-diving watch? Why put a diving bezel? Well, you can easily put that on top of your winter gear, I suppose, if you're going trekking somewhere up high. What's interesting about this watch is the color balance in it. What you see here is essentially grayish watch, but the bezel has a very unique red tint, dark reddish brown tint. There's a very fine pattern also, honeycomb pattern, which is very hard to see unless you put on a loop. The indexes are very well made. Lume is typical Seiko. And all in all, you can see really the quality of this watch in this dial, since focus. There you go. You can see the quality. This was a very expensive piece back in the day. I think it retailed for around 110,000 yen back in 2000, which is a lot of money. And the quality shows. In the case pack, there's some space where you can inscribe your personal details, such as blood type and so on, if it ever finds you trapped underneath an avalanche somewhere in the Alps, or in Mount Fuji, or wherever. Well, in all, it's a very sturdy watch. As I said, it's made to last, and last it will. So let's take a look how it looks on the wrist. And here we have it on the wrist. My wrist as a point of reference is around 19 centimeters wide, something less. Now the watch has a very nice feeling. There is some heft, although it's very light as a titanium watch. I'd say it's around 110 to 120 grams, depending on how many links you have fitted. But it sits somewhat high on the wrist, and this provides you with the necessary feeling of heft that you usually don't get from a very light watch. This one has some considerable wrist presence. And also this reddish dial looks very nice against pretty much every kind of lighting. It's not like a sunburst dial, which I think it's, some of the newest Seiko special editions have some very intense metallic coloring, which I think it's a bit too flashy. Well, it is, at least for my taste. This is exactly the perfect balance between pizzazz and something dark and mysterious and alluring. This is what I see when I look into this bezel. I guess it's somewhat closer to the design elements of the Breitling, this particular Seiko, with all the nice details on the bezel, also very nicely thought out dial. There's sapphire crystal, which sits flat and relatively deep into the watch. The bezel protrudes significantly, so the crystal is well protected. Usually when you find used Landmaster, the crystal is clean. And also usually the bezel doesn't have a lot of wear. It's very, as I said, it's pretty hard to put a dent into this watch. The bracelet may pick up a few scratches eventually, so will the buckle. The interesting thing about this buckle, it's titanium B alloy, and the fun part of this, as I found out, is that you can actually polish this titanium B, if it's a polished surface, with some Cape Cod, and this restores very well any titanium B polished surface, just as you would with a stainless steel polished surface, and this is very handy. So there you have it, folks. Thanks for watching, and see you in my next video.